What do Black Wall Street, the infant mortality rate in Kalamazoo, Michigan, going from almost zero to 2 to 3 times more than white babies, and the Hillmantok shadow band all have in common? Stay right there. Let's talk about it. There is an insidious historical link to the disparity and demise of Black wealth, health, and education. And we don't have to go too far to connect the dots. Many of us are familiar with the Tulsa, Oklahoma Mecca, Black Wall Street, where many families, communities, and business thrive despite of the overt and systematic racism that existed in every fiber of their existence. In 1921, from May 31st to June 1st, over the course of 2 days, white supremacist mobs that were deputized by law enforcement took to the community. Where once stood a community that had its own banking system, schools, educational systems, health, hospitals and clinics, transportation, airports, was burned to the ground over the course of 2 days. In addition to businesses that were consumed by the ashes, were newspapers, churches, public libraries, hotels, and of course, these folks' homes. It was said that over 10,000 people were left without homes. What has been reported to have been one of the most heinous and gravest acts of domestic terrorism. At the time, it was reported that 36 lives were lost during the massacre. But since then, the number has risen to over 300, and we know that number is far greater than that. In the aftermath of rioting, burning down personal property, and looting, that adopted behavior sounds real familiar. The question arose, how and why did this happen? And the answer is rooted in no more than the economic and societal disparities that existed amongst Black Americans and those who believed to be better and that they should have more. This chapter of American history goes beyond tragic as we pivot to infant mortality rate disparities amongst Black babies. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, it became undeniable as research exposed higher infant mortality rates amongst Black babies 2 to 3 times higher than white babies. Dr. Arthur James, a Black obstetrician, gynecologist, and pediatrician, sought to figure out and correct the disparities in infant mortality rates amongst Black babies versus white babies. It was Dr. James' belief that these numbers would minimize themselves when the expected mother received care from community members that looked and represented her. For reasons known and innately unknown, it is no secret that the Black community experienced a higher degree of mistrust amongst the medical industrial complex. It was Dr. James' belief that when mothers experienced care, wraparound services from community members that represented and looked like her, these outcomes could be drastically improved. So, Dr. James' response to this crisis, he opened up a clinic to provide services for Black mothers, and every aspect of the clinic was to represent the mother, care for the mother. Not only were there black doctors, there were black nurses, there were black med techs, the receptionist was black, the housekeeping people were black, the people in billing, the case managers. Every person that black mother came in contact with was black. And what would you know? That mother experienced the best pregnancy, the best delivery, and the best baby experience she could have ever hoped for. Dr. James's brilliance in addressing the expected mother's environment and her overall healthcare experience not only led to the decreased prevalence of black babies dying, but better outcomes for the birthing mother as well as her community at large. So what do you think happened and why that number went from almost zero back to 2 to 3 times higher than white babies, surpassing white death rates of babies? White women. As white women began learning of the success of these healthy babies, healthy deliveries, the decrease in infant mortality rate, they began to flood this clinic. What did that mean? That meant less services for black women because now we're inclusive, we're sharing services. And not to mention, that didn't go over too well with white baby doctors. As white physicians, obstetricians, gynecologists, and pediatricians saw that their dollars were leaving their community, going into this black community with their white women having babies and entrusting their care to these black folk, they couldn't have that. They weren't going to risk losing their lifestyles. And what did they do? As people who can't compete based on merit typically do, they started a fear campaign. Not only did they start a fear campaign, but they campaigned to have the clinic's licenses revoked by the medical board. And they were successful. So now we're not giving care to white or black mothers to produce healthy babies. Because we have to remember there's money in illness and death. Which leads me to the Hillmantok ban. Before all of this other debauchery that's taking place, Hillmantok was shadow banned. And you have to ask, who cares whether or not black folk are learning from black folk? Who really cares when black folk are trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, the straps that y'all keep stealing out of the boots? When I began to see videos of white women, talking about how excited they were about Hillmantok and that they would sit in the back of the class and just be quiet and observe and learn from us, I knew that wouldn't be the case. When white women began to infiltrate our space, I knew chaos would erupt, and it did. We began hearing reports of how disruptive they became in those spaces, wanting everything to be centered around them and their knowledge base and their misunderstood nature. So my point is, with Black Wall Street, this Hillmantok ban, and the infant mortality rate of black babies, the key and continuous component is our effort to always go overboard with being inclusive. And as black people, we have to learn it, and we have to learn it now, that we don't have to share everything. Because history has shown up, demonstrated to us, it is not rewarded. So let's practice doing that backstage work of our lives privately, and to the critics, when we present on the front stage of life, we can be more inclusive. Thank you. Bye.